we'll open things up now for other panel members that want to react to various things here. But one thing I wanted to sort of toss out, in an earlier part of my career, Intel sponsored my work, and so I got a lot of opportunity to see how Intel operates. And work groups in Intel, like most modern companies, are a lot different than faculty departments. People tend to select into groups for around particular tasks or purposes. They stay while it makes sense, and then they move on to something else. In many respects, perhaps ISP is sort of a very first stab in an institution like Pitt at moving closer to that kind of a model where faculty are around for a long time and are valued as important resources for a long time, but occasionally regroup how they work together and what problems they work on collectively to get more done. So maybe the future of ISP in 30 years from now, people will no longer be talking about just how conservative universities are, but will in fact have learned what I think we've started to learn a bit about how to take the incredible intellectual resources that any university has and repurpose them from time to time to tackle new issues. I've recruited a lot of faculty over the years, and I always tell them that nobody comes to Pittsburgh for the beaches. This is an intellectual candy store. There are smart people all over the place, and we might occasionally just think about, reclustering ourselves to get different things done. I think ISP was an example of that. Any of my colleagues have other thoughts?
I think you said it perfectly.
A good teacher should wait longer for comments, but are there comments? Are there any questions or comments from, yes,
So
Vincent?
we were asked if you could maybe get
If
that
you-
microphone and people who have questions, pass them around.
We can pass this to people because we want to try and capture more of this stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, you deliver. So I have a comment and something that is either a comment or a question. I'm not sure yet. But so the comment is that actually the version that I heard of the perfect is the enemy of the done is, this came from my advisor. The only good dissertation is a done dissertation. So, and actually, if you look at the number of pages on my dissertation, you could wonder whether I really heeded that advice or not. But I did finish it. Now my comment or question is, two of you mentioned that the way in running a good program and maybe doing many other things in life is to surround yourself with smart people and listen to them. But this makes me wonder, smart people tend to not always agree with each other, as we saw illustrated very vividly. So thank you. And so I wonder, so at one level that sounds like really good advice, but it also sounds like there is some piece missing, namely, maybe this was Alan being modest or so, but it seems like if you don't have the vision or some vision that you're willing to modify when you listen to the smart people, but if there is no vision, you just end up being confused, I think. So. If there is a question, it's like how do you balance the having the vision and listening at the same time?
Also, there's an element of luck. You need to have the right smart people around. So if I was fortunate enough to be around Alan Newell and John McCarthy, and there's just no doubt with those people. It's not an issue of people disagreeing. If somebody is that powerful and that good at what they're doing, there is just no doubt. But you have to be lucky to find people like that. They're not very thick on the ground.
Paul wanted to say.
Paul?
Sorry, hit the microphone.
Sorry, I'll shout.
No, it's for the video.
Thank you. So Diane was right. I mean, I think that the vision of the new school of computing and information takes a lot from the the philosophy and orientation of ISP, and I think it's a magnificent organization. And it's been interesting to hear this retrospective, but my question is really about the next 30 years. And I want to frame that question in the context of today's talk from Brian Selesky. I mean, it's pretty clear that there are problems that might have once been in the domain of ISP that now are being solved more effectively by companies. The context is changing, and I've just had the great experience of spending 4 years working with government, and I think that for ISP or pretty much any academic program to survive 30 years more is going to require a real attention to interaction with companies and government and others. I think particularly in artificial intelligence, we are imperiled if we don't. And I'd like to hear from the panel, like, what are you going to do about that, right? How are you going to make those connections? What does the future of ISP look like in 5, 10, 30 years from now?
One possibility, as our speaker mentioned earlier, it's the company with the most data that gets the most done. And there isn't currently a way for companies to get any credit when they share data with universities. If there was a tax write-off for that, we would get what we need.
So I've been working for 30 years or so in a field, artificial intelligence and law, where for most of that time nobody really cared in the world. And then suddenly in the last 2 or 3 years, the legal domain does care, and there are a lot of companies springing up and startups and a lot of activity. And it's very exciting, but it's also very traumatic because those companies, they may well be making fantastic inventions, discovering new things, but they're not publishing it, and they're not sharing this information. And I don't really see how one sustains a community in those circumstances. They want graduate students to work for them, but does everything stop then? And as soon as they work for the company, there's a non-disclosure agreement and the field doesn't learn? I don't think you can run a railroad that way. So I think it's very important that whatever accommodations are made with companies, and I do believe in doing that, that publication becomes a paramount goal and a restriction so that we can ensure that the field improves and people can learn from the experiences.
I was going to throw it back to you. I know that is part of the plan for the new building to do it, and I think, to the extent that we're successful, it will benefit everybody, given the concerns that, I came from industrial research, so I'm very well aware of all the issues of not sharing and publication restrictions, but our students do build good connections. Most of them, work in industry during the summer. It'd be nice to be able to, continue building on those ties throughout the year.
So if I could ask a follow-up question in the spirit of consulting with really smart people. My first question was really about what's the vision, if you like, the business plan for ISP for the next 30 years. But this question is, should there be one, given that ISP has always been sort of a pickup game? It's always been people who are self-selecting and they get together, and as Kurt pointed out, there are no resources, so what the hell? Is it in fact appropriate for such an organization to be thinking about its strategic plan, or should it just keep on going as a pickup game?
Well, I'm getting signals that we're supposed to stop soon, but it seems to me that to some extent it can be a pickup game, but pickup games can have strategies. Working groups and companies organize around a particular purpose. They don't stay in their exact same structure forever, but it's not that there's no strategic planning. I think the danger is in spending too much time thinking about what Speer called ruin value and too little time thinking about what's the immediate problem that can bring a bunch of smart minds together and get some good done, you know, over a 5 or 10 or 20-year time horizon? Any other thoughts? Well, a large sign that in yellow and black that said stop. So I believe we'll be stopping now, and I guess we'll continue at 11:15. Is that?
Yes.
Yes, in 10 minutes.